that can require learning to unlearn. So I was recently watching a video about a guy, and they got the bicycle that he'd learned to ride as a 5-year-old, and they switched the handlebars around the opposite way. So whenever you go like this, it would go the opposite way. And it took him months to figure out how to ride, because you get on that thing, you're just used to going like this, right? To use Dr. House's example of learning to ride a bike. Learning to unride the bike, I'd love to put an image or video on. Had I known you were going to use that, it was a great example to show you. And honestly, if you ever did it yourself at home, like be careful, wear a helmet, you know, the whole lot, because it's really hard. You have been so programmed to ride a certain way. So learning to unlearn the way you've done it can be really challenging. I want you all just to cross your arms right now. I want you to look at the person next to you. Now, I'd like you to observe them, but you do it at the same time as you cross your arms the opposite way. Okay, we've got a few little smart cookies at the front here, but who felt like their IQ points went down about 20 points just then? I'm the same. Oh, I can't even do it anyway right now. We are programmed to do things a certain way. You know, we have these neural pathways in the brain, and you go along it enough times, and that's how you do things. This is how I do it. This is how I've always do it. I start my day with a cup of tea. Earl Grey, Twinings, thank you. No, not English breakfast. No, not that awful iced tea stuff you drink with powder. Ugh. No, Earl Grey, hot milk, 1 sugar. Like, that's what I like to do. Now, I'm just throwing myself on my sword here, saying that's just my little ritual. That's how I like to start the day. And so if someone says, I go somewhere, I go to Nepal, and I can't have it, and it's powdered milk, I'm like, oh, breakdown. But in everything we do, in how you go about what you do, you have habitual ways of doing things. You have just the default path, right? That's what you do. It's what you know. You've done it for years this way. This is how you do it. That's why my mother just cannot deal with technology. She's like, I just like to pick up the phone and call you, darling. And don't start me on that. Anyway. But in order to thrive in our lives, and in order for organisations to thrive and to grow and to fulfil what they exist to do, you have to be continually willing to unlearn what you think you know and what you just do, so that you can relearn a better way of doing it. It's like stripping off old paint so you can paint something fresh and new. You know, when the Wright brothers were trying to get a plane up in the air, at the time the greatest minds said, the British Physics Society, it is impossible to get a heavier than air machine into the air. It's just a physical impossibility. And all of the bright, engineers couldn't figure it out, but a couple of bicycle repairmen could, because they just wouldn't buy into the belief that it's not possible. Until 1956, it was believed a human being, our bodies, could not run a mile in under 4 minutes. we're just not made. The greatest minds of the time, the greatest academics, physiologists, it's not possible. And then this British guy ran it in 3 minutes, 59.6 seconds. And within 1 second of that, within 6 weeks of that, an Australian guy, John Landy, took nearly a second off that. And then in the next 2 years, that record was taken down 11 times by 11 different people. Why was that? Because someone had shown that the belief of what was possible was actually false. And yet, in our lives, we've all got beliefs about what we can do and what we can't do on that personal level. After I finished college years ago, I spent a year backpacking around the world. I ended up in Thailand. And I was traveling through the jungle with my brother Frank, and we were staying in this little village. And I noticed these elephants weren't wandering off. And I said to our guide, how come the elephants don't wander off? And he said, well, when they're born, they put a bracelet around their ankle that tethers them to a stake or a tree in the village. And they go to wander off. They're about a ton at birth. And they go to wander off, but they can't. So they try a few times, and they just give up. They don't try because they can't. And then when they're 2 or 3, they take away that chain, And the elephants are obviously capable of going much further, but they have been conditioned to believe they can't. And as we know, there's a lot of experiments that have shown similar things. And I remember thinking, how silly are these elephants? But how often do we, as human beings, who have such incredible intelligence, still buy into beliefs about what can and can't be done based on past experience? And we are wired with what's called perceptual defense mechanism. We're wired to defend our view of reality. We also have something what's called confirmation bias, and to look just for evidence that proves that we're right and the rest of you are wrong. It's why the woman at the V-Day parades, her son is the only one marching in a different step to the other 10,000 soldiers, and she looks and she says to the person next to her, oh, the rest, they're all out of step, it's only my son that's in step. That's why George Carlin, the comedian, once said, have you ever noticed when you're driving that everyone going faster than you is a maniac and everyone going slower is an idiot? You don't see the world as it is. You don't see March of Dimes as it is. You don't see the potential to impact change and to help people and to ease suffering as it is. You see it as you are through your lens. And all of the things that you struggle with and you wrestle with and you get a bit gripey about and frustrated with, it's not how it is, it's how you're seeing it. And being willing to step back and to say, how else could I see this? What are the assumptions that I'm operating under that are limiting the actions that I'm taking? Where am I buying into stories about what can be done and what can't be done, about who I am? Well, I'm not that like my mother. Oh, I'm not that good with technology. I can't do it. Like, you can do it. There's a lot of people your age who do it. Oh, I'm too old. No, you're not too old. Okay, no, I don't get that frustrated with her. I'm really nice. Maybe a little bit. Because the stories, what we tell ourselves, creates the emotions we feel, and your emotions are predispositions to action. And if you think you can't, you won't even try. And when it comes to the changes that you're going to have to deal with throughout your life, but here and beyond, what's the story you're telling yourself? What is the narrative you have about it? Because that narrative will profoundly impact how well you deal with it, the stress you feel or the lack of stress, the joy you feel or the lack of joy, the actions you take or the lack of action. That we resist tends to persist. So if you find yourself feeling emotionally like, ask yourself, what's the story that's creating that? Because it's what you're telling yourself that creates it. When it comes to stress, yes, there are situations which are stressful, but we create a lot of our own stress by what we're telling ourselves all the time. And when it comes to really doing what you have the potential to do, and William James once said, most people live in a very restricted circle of potential. But what could be done if you challenged what you think is possible? If you thought, maybe there's other ways of seeing this. Maybe my way of seeing things isn't not only the right way, maybe there's actually more effective, constructive ways of viewing this situation. I encourage you to think about, what is it, where is it that you have assumptions about what can and can't be done?